Good evening. Good evening. I'm calling to order the Large House Review Study Committee Community Meeting of November 18th. I'm just going to check with our Zoom monitor to make sure that we're working okay on Zoom. Is it all right? Yeah. Thank you. This meeting is a hybrid meeting in that people are here in the auditorium with us. There are many other people who may be at home participating in the meeting remotely. I am Mo Handel, co-chair of the Large House Study Committee, along with Artie Crocker, who's to my right. First item of business is to call the roll. Artie Crocker.
Here.
Jean McKnight.
Here.
Heidi Frail.
Here.
Marion Cooley.
Here.
Mo Handel is here. Tina Burgos. Nick Ligris. Bill Paulson.
Here.
Paul McGovern.
Here.
Oscar Mertz.
Here.
Chris Cotter. Here. Rob Dangle. Joe Matthews, who may be participating on Zoom.
He's online.
So he is online.
Mute, Joe. You're mute.
Here.
Joe, if you just type into the chat that you're here, we're fine. Ed Quinlan.
Here.
Thank you. Welcome and thank you for coming to this final community meeting of the Large House Study Committee. Before we report back to the planning board with findings and recommendations, at that point, the planning board will take those under advisement and will be having its own set of public hearings and meetings to present a potential zoning bylaw change to town meeting, hopefully in May of 2026. The members of our committee were appointed by a number of boards and authorities in the town, and their names are listed on the slide in front of you. They represent a broad range of professional and administrative responsibility issues in town government and in the private sector. This committee was appointed by several town bodies to achieve a broad perspective of the issues that we are studying. The slide before you shows who appointed which member of this committee. We were charged with studying homes in the single-family district B and in the general residence district, not in the 1 acre zoning districts in town. I want to emphasize that the primary goal has been to develop a realistic means of preserving both the value and the quality of these districts for the people who live in them. Tonight, we are presenting our work and gaining your feedback along with answering any questions you may have. We ask that you hold your questions and comments until the end of the presentations you'll hear tonight. Lastly, the schedule and timeline of our work is on the screen behind me and on the your computer screen if you're participating remotely. This is our last meeting, as I stated earlier, before we present to the planning board. Thank you very much if you've been to previous meetings, and we really appreciate your participation. We're glad you could make it this evening, and for those of you at home participating, thank you as well. And now I'd like to recognize Oscar Mertz, architect and committee member, who will start the substance of our presentation, which will consist both of an architectural approach to the study we conducted, and secondly, there will be a presentation on the financial aspects that affect both homeowners and the town. And we'll have presentations on that as well. Oscar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Artie. Thank you all to all my committee members and also to the folks who are here and also online. We greatly look forward to your feedback, your input. We are nearing the resolution or conclusion of our work, as Mo mentioned, and handing our work off to the planning board to make their final determinations and bring it out to public for hearings and also final drafting of any bylaw changes that they proceed with. As you see on the screen ahead of you or in front of you, that is essentially the table of zoning criteria that we are going to be talking about in detail as we move through the presentation tonight. The committee has been pretty dedicated to trying to get as much information to understand Needham's current situation with large houses and also to try and put it in the context of some neighboring towns. You see a list of towns there that we've gone into detail with and discussed their experiences with officials in those towns and looked at some data from those towns, Wellesley, Newton, Lexington, and Concord. Sorry. The FAR issue is essentially what became the pivotal information we thought was important to look at. And so you will see tonight some options on how we are going to present some calculations for FAR that would be used to potentially control some reduction options for houses in town. And in conjunction with understanding the volumetric adjustments to these houses, we thought it was important to understand what the fiscal impacts would be of the potential reductions on the sizes of these houses to the value of that property and potentially to the town's tax base. So we will hear about that tonight from our consultant to my right. The first effort was really for the committee was to take a look at, I would say, a pretty good cross-section of lots in town. We looked at essentially non-conforming lots under 10,000 and then some conforming lots above 10,000. We looked at a total of 32 houses and we actually analyzed all of those plans and also took tours and tried to understand as a committee how we felt about all of them and and did surveys among ourselves to get familiar with what was an experience of the houses currently in Needham. One of the critical parts of doing this assessment we thought was to try and create some visual materials so that people could actually see what a change in size of house looked like. And so what you're seeing here is a sample of the house reduction models that we created with a consultant. And these reflected on the left, you'll see that the existing house was created in a model, and we did 3 sample houses in Needham, existing houses, and we looked at houses at 10,000, 9,000, and 7,800 because we felt that the adjustments to the sizes of these houses on small lots was actually a pretty important area to focus on. So you'll see that we then created these 3-dimensional comparisons of the existing house to the potential 3 reduction changes. And we thought that was a really helpful way for people to understand what this really could look like, how much these changes would create a different size house. And you'll see in those models that essentially they're compared to an outline. And you can see the house getting smaller relative to the existing house size. And this was just another way of comparing. On the left, you would see the base house, and then each time on the right, you will see the house going through 3 reductions. All of this was done for 3 houses in complete presentations, and all that is available to look at, but it's far too much material to share tonight. The other thing that we thought was very important was in studying each of these reductions, we looked at the actual floor plans of all the houses, and then we proceeded with an architectural analysis of the reductions, where you would take them, how this would impact the potential size and shapes of the houses and the rooms in the houses, and always trying to keep an eye on that there was a target program that we would try and still address. Even as these houses got smaller, they were able to meet up with this marketing, this sort of target program, albeit smaller with slightly different bathroom configurations. But we studied those options to make sure we were not, doing a house production that was going to not be viable. So as I mentioned, we also felt it really important to analyze the other neighboring towns and what their experiences were with their houses and how large those houses were. And so we looked at and collected data and talked to officials. And then we were able to understand in this graph exactly how Needham currently sits with a house size as you see here. We picked 3 lot sizes, 7,500, 10,000, and 12,500. And you'll see the Needham current size house achievable on each of those lots, and then the 4 towns to the right. And you can see, and depending on the size of the lot, Needham has, essentially ahead of the game or above the crowd in all these cases. So the component to understand and the impact of these potential reductions on a homeowner who's trying to sell their lot was something we thought was important to understand. And so there is a fiscal analysis that was done by our consultant RKG, and Eric is here tonight to share that with you.
Great. Thanks, Oscar. Thanks to the committee and the town. Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Halverson. I'm a principal with RKG Associates. My firm was brought in to conduct the financial and fiscal impact analysis of the different reduction scenarios, which I'd like to share with you this evening. Bear with me. It's a lot of numbers. I will try my best to walk through it in the easiest, most understandable way possible, but we do have a question and answer period later, so happy to answer questions that might come up. So as we went through the beginning of this process, the town kind of had the committee had 3 primary goals for our work, which was to evaluate how the potential changes in the zoning and the FAR might impact, 1, home building activity in Needham and what we call sort of the feasibility of redevelopment or the tearing down of an existing home and the rebuilding of a new home. In much of the cases, a much larger home, as you'll see. 2, how are market prices, so sale prices of the new home and then developer behavior potentially impacted by the changes to zoning. And 3, how might the existing property values be impacted for those who might be looking to sell their home at some point in time if the new regulations were put in place, and then how might that impact the town's property tax value as well. So those are kind of the questions we were asked to answer. At the very beginning of the project, we had to sort through a lot of data from a multitude of different sources, some coming from the town, some coming from members of the committee who have access to real estate data and real estate transactions data through multiple listing service or MLS. The key thing here was we need to understand a couple of different things. The first is what was happening from a home sale perspective in Needham we chose a period of 5 years. So basically 21, 22, 23, 24, and up to about probably September or so of 25. So about a 5-year panel of data. What was happening with actual sales of existing homes? Where were they selling? How much were they selling for? How large were they? What condition were they in? Where were they located? So that was piece 1. The second piece is, since we're talking about tear down rebuilds for the most part in Needham, we also needed to get data from the town on where demolitions of existing homes in the SRB zoning district were occurring, and then where new construction permits were pulled. And we needed them to be, the demolition and the construction permit needed to be on the same lot so that we could match those up. And then we could also match them with sales records data to say, this property sold on this date within the window that we're looking at for this price, and this is the type of house. We then see a demolition permit, which means it was torn down. Then some period of time later, we see a new construction permit, which means something was put back in its place. So we needed to actually match all of those records together, and then finally match them with actual parcel assessment records so we could understand the size of the lot, the value of the home that was already there and its location, and also, is it within the SRB zoning district? We then needed to match all of those. So matching demolitions and construction permits with actual sales records. We needed to then filter those just so we were making sure we're looking at the SRB district, and then matching them with sales records. So once we did all this, there were about 332 tear down rebuild projects that occurred in the SRB over that time period of 2020 to almost the end of 25. And we were able to then match 202 of those properties with all of those elements that I talked about, a demolition permit, a construction permit, sales activity. So that's essentially our pool of candidate data, our candidate parcels that we were able to work with. Just some information, just so you all can see sort of what's been happening from a data perspective. So through the year 2025, or for the year 2025 up until the point where we didn't have data anymore, the existing homes that were selling, that were being torn down, were just a little over 1,600 square feet in size, and they were selling for $1,025,000. The new homes that were then being built and sold were about 5,800 square feet. So going from 1,672 to 5,800 square feet, and going from a original sale price of a little over $1 million to a new sale price of $2.7 million. So obviously we have much bigger homes and much more expensive homes replacing the smaller, less expensive homes. Just as point of comparison, for the full year of 2024, we see a very similar pattern. The median sales price is a little bit lower here, $855,000. So there has been an increase in the last year in the sale prices. And then a final sale price on the new homes of about a little over 2.6 million. So not too much of a change, but prices have continued to go up, as I'm sure you're all well aware. Since 2020, prices pretty much everywhere in Massachusetts have been going up substantially. This graphic just shows the differences between 2021 through 2025. It shows the median sale price per square foot, which hasn't really changed that much. 2021 was fairly low at $421 a square foot, but 22, 3, 4, and 5 are pretty much in the same range. And then it gives you a count of how many teardown rebuilds we were actually able to match and measure in a given year. It ranges from about 36 or a low of 33 to a high of 42, just given the year. But in each year, we do have a pretty good sample size of homes. So how did we translate those numbers then down into the potential impacts for existing homeowners and also for the developer builders? So this was an interesting process that we went through with members of the subcommittee of the Large House Review Committee. We effectively needed to work the problem backwards because we know, based on what new large homes are selling for, right, that $2.7 million, we kind of have a fixed number at one end of the equation. And we're trying to work backwards to understand how might a change in that final sale price change what the existing homeowner would be able to sell their home for. Is there a relationship there? So we have this $2.7 million fixed sale price on this end. We then know that we have a cost to tear down the existing home. There might be some site work that needs to be done. There's permitting, there's interest, there's holding costs on that as the builder begins to put the plans in front of the town, get their permits. Then there's an actual cost to build the new home, which we would consider to be a fixed cost that really can't fluctuate one way or another. Materials sort of cost what they do, labor costs what it does. And in Needham, you are basically building a relatively high-end home, a luxury home. So builders are not really going to skimp on finishes on the interior or the exterior because they're trying to maximize what they can sell that home for and be competitive in the market. So we would consider the cost to build essentially a fixed cost. And then the builders aren't doing this for free. They're in it to make profit. So we also have a fixed cost, which we assumed based on builder and developer interviews and working with the committee to be about a 15% profit margin on the sale. And that is not just the money that goes into their pockets, but we also figure there's soft costs and there's holding costs that are part of that as well, which are basically fixed. So if we have a final sale price that we're targeting, we have a cost to build that's fixed, and we have a profit margin that's fixed. The only sort of fungible number in this equation that's left is the price to purchase the original property, if that makes sense. So that's really what we're trying to solve for, is if we know the fixed costs along the way, how might the original sale price that a seller today is trying to sell to, whether it be to a homeowner or a builder, how much might that fluctuate with the new zoning regulations if they were to go into place? So I'm going to walk through a couple of slides that sort of build on each other to get to that final answer. So on the slide in the table here, you'll see a base house one, which is representative on a sale price per square foot of $479, and what we call livable area, which includes all of your finished floors that you would normally think of in a house, including the basement and the attic, but it does exclude the garage. This is sort of how it's presented in the MLS when it comes to sales records. So we wanted to be consistent with that data. So we have the price per square foot for our base house, and we have our livable area of just under 5,700 square feet, which was consistent with the numbers that Oscar was showing earlier with the different house sizes. That's basically our median size house today that has been built based on all of the data that we have researched of the tear down rebuilds. Reduction 1, 1.5, 2, and 3 are the reduction scenarios that were provided to RKG by the committee so that we could understand how much the FAR or the floor area ratio in each of those reduction scenarios might come down from the original base house. So that sort of is setting the stage for what we're going to look at. This next line in the table now looks at what is the estimated sale value of the newly built home. So to get those numbers, we would multiply the sale price per square foot times the size of the house or the livable area of the house. So now you see the estimated end sale value of that home, the base house at 2.7, which we talked about before. And you can see as each reduction goes down the line, we're reducing the square footage. We are increasing the price per square foot because that is sort of a linear relationship. Or I should say, I guess a non-linear relationship. Price per square foot tends to go up as square footage of the home comes down. And then you can see the estimated sale value of the home comes down from about 2.7 to just over 2 million by the time we get to reduction 3. So now we have our fixed endpoint that we're working against. Next, we have what is called the cost to buy the original home. So this would be your sale price. If you owned a home today and you were looking to sell it, this would be the median sale price of all of our tear down rebuilds that we looked at in 2025, if you remember the 1,025,000. So now we know what that number is. We subtract the estimated sale value from the cost to buy, and we get what we call the change in sale value. So that's effectively one way to think of it is that's what it's going to cost to build the house, or that's essentially what's left over between your sale value and your original purchase price. So we have those numbers in there. And then we have to factor in the profit. So we take our change in sale value from the original home to the new home, we multiply that by 15%, and that's how we get to our developer profit. Again, that's developer profit, soft costs, holding costs, everything that's not necessarily associated with building the actual house. Now, what happens here is today under base house 1, under your sort of typical average scenario for tear down rebuilds in Needham, that estimated developer profit based on base house 1 scenario is a little over $250,000. But if you look down the line in that table through reduction 1 through reduction 3, you can see that that developer profit comes down because the estimated sale value of the new house is coming down over time, but we've effectively fixed what they're going to pay for the original house. So that developer, or if I was that developer and I could say, well, in today's market, I could make $251,000. Under reduction 3, my profit's going to almost be cut in half, we're going to be cut by almost $100,000. I would probably maybe start looking at other communities to do work in, right? Because I still need to make my 15%. I've got to pay my bills. I have to pay my people. So what we looked at is what would be the required change in the original sale price of the homeowner who's trying to sell to someone so that the developer could maintain that 15% profit that they would have today. So you'll see in the line that I just showed up in reduction 1, there's negative $17,647. That's essentially the difference between the $251,000 profit under base house 1 and the $233,000 profit under reduction 1. Just go down the line and each of those negative 35,000, negative 53,000, negative 91,000. That's essentially the change in the cost to buy the original house or the change to the seller on that sale price. The last line item in the table, which I just showed, is what we're calling the revised purchase price to the developer. That's essentially the potential change to the homeowner who's looking to sell. So if they could have sold for 1,025,000 today under the zoning regulations. If reduction one was put in place, we would estimate that sale price could come down to a little bit over 1 million. So 1,007,353, and so on down the line as we go down for each reduction. So that is the way we quantified it for this. And I have a couple of other slides in here that just talk a little bit about some of the caveats, because I think it's really important to cover those as well. So just on the caveat slide, the sale price for the original property, in going through the data and talking with home builders in Needham, it really depends on a lot of different factors. One is, what is the condition of the existing home and the condition of the lot itself? If you have a home that has not really been maintained for 30, 40, 50 years, just very basic maintenance, versus a home that may have just gotten a new roof or an updated air conditioning system and heating system, or a lot of landscaping done to the lot, there's going to be a difference in those sale prices between those two homes. And there's also going to be a difference in who might want to purchase that home, depending on the amount of money they want to put into that home after they purchase it. I think the lot size makes a big difference. So a smaller lot, as Oscar was saying, that maybe a 7,500 square foot lot might end up selling for less than a 12,500 square foot lot or a half an acre lot. People put value into the size of the lawn and the yard depending on their household situation. I think the location of the lot also makes a big difference. Are you closer to public transit? Are you closer to the downtown? Are you closer to schools? Things that you might want to walk to or might want to be in close proximity to, versus is your home sort of on the edge of the community? There are also seller motivations. How quickly does the person who's selling need or want to get out of their house? Maybe they've purchased a house somewhere else and they need to close very quickly. Developers might bring cash to the table, and they might have flexible closing costs and closing timelines versus, say, a family who's trying to build that and they're trying to sell their house somewhere and they need the flexibility. So just want to caveat that although, we think that the analysis is sound and it's built on a lot of sound data, there are, anomalies in, they're just factors that, might change the initial sale price of that house. The other thing that we looked at too is, based on the sale price, there seem to be different groups who might target the purchase of that home based on what that home is on the market for. So we just broke this down into 3 categories working with the committee. So I guess starting from the bottom and working our way to the top, the lower priced homes, we would say between, say, $800,000 to $1 million are probably the primary targets of developers and builders. At that price, it's likely that the home is older and probably needs some work, or it might be on a smaller piece of land. And those developers may be more willing to offer cash, flexible closing costs, flexible closing terms for those older homes, because they know that they're likely to tear it down and probably build something new. Then there's this $1 million to $1.3 million-ish middle ground, where it's kind of an even playing field or an even mix of what we call owners, so someone who's actually looking to purchase the home and then move into the home, versus developers or builders who might be looking to tear the home down and build something new. Again, I think the competition depends a lot on the condition of the home and the location and the lot size, as to sort of who's going to compete for that home. Once we're over that $1.3 million mark, it's probably mostly owner occupants who are looking to purchase that home. The home's likely in better condition. It's probably move-in ready. Maybe it needs some new paint on the walls or some minor repairs, but largely that home is move-in ready, and it's probably going to get purchased by someone who wants to live in that house. Also, as the initial sale price creeps up closer and closer to that 1.3 or above, the profit margin is squeezed, because the developer at the end of the day, or the builder, can only sell that newly built home for so much, because it can only be so big if the lot sizes are the constraining factors. So basically, in terms of the potential impact of zoning changes, again, for these kind of different tiers that we have, on the bottom tier and in the middle tier, if we do see house sizes starting to shrink, there might actually be some additional downward pressure on tear down candidates, particularly for larger lots, or maybe homes that might not be in as great a condition. Some of those homes might sit a little bit longer. if that's the case. But in the top tier, if you have a home that's on a nice lot in a good location in relatively good shape and doesn't need a lot of work, there's probably still going to be a lot of high demand from owners. Developers are probably going to be less active in that market. So we don't think there'll be a ton of changes, at least for the long term. There may be some changes to the original sale prices we talked about before in the short term. I think what we heard from the committee in their interviews with other communities, sort of anecdotally, there was an initial sort of shock to the market where prices took some time to sort of come back to where they were, maybe a year or two to come back to where they were today. So eventually we think they'll get back there, but there may be some impact to someone who might be looking to sell immediately. Just on to the last bit, which is around the fiscal impact. So this would be this is the analysis around the property taxes and the impact to the town of Needham themselves, not necessarily the homeowners or the builders. So what we did for this analysis is we took those final sale values that we just went over under the different reduction scenarios. And we assumed that taking 95% of that sale value as the assessed value. So the assessor kind of knocks off 5%, give or take, from the final sale price to come up with what the assessed value is for applying property taxes. Once we had the assessed value, we then applied Needham's residential tax rate of $10.60 per $1,000 in value to then estimate the potential property tax of the home. And we compared the tax revenue change between the original home that was purchased and the house that was then built where the original one was torn down. So in this final table, we see base house and the reductions. We see the estimated sale prices that we talked about from about 2.7 million to just over 2 million by the time we get to reduction 3. We then have the estimated assessed value, which is just 95% of the sale price. And then just for calculation purposes, we have what the change in assessed value is between the base house 1 and everything by the time we get to reduction 3. We have the FY25 tax rate for Needham, and then we have the tax value per home. This is the estimated property tax value on the new home. So for example, base house 1, if it has an assessed value of 2.585 million, that's a property tax of about $27,407. And that goes all the way across, again, through each of the reduction scenarios. Then we have a line called opportunity cost, which is effectively, because one thing we were thinking about is if you have a home that's in Needham today, and let's say the assessed value is that $1,025,000, which is the sort of median sale price of a home that's been torn down. That is generating today property taxes for the town, but it's generating far less property taxes than a $2.7 million teardown rebuild. So that opportunity cost is essentially the property tax delta between leaving the house as it is today and not tearing it down versus the $2.7 million house. And then we have the difference in tax collections per house. So you can see as the assessed value goes down from reduction 1 to reduction 3 on a per house basis in SRB, under reduction 1, it might represent about $1,400 in loss to the town. By the time you get to reduction 3, about $6,300. The final line, and I think the end of my presentation, is the difference for 65 homes. So 65 homes is roughly the average number of teardown rebuilds occurring in Needham across the whole town for each year over the last 5 years. So we just wanted to sort of put it in an order of magnitude for those 65 homes. So it just basically takes the tax difference per house and multiplies it by 65. Okay. On to Paul.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening. My name is Paul McGovern. I'm going to do some of the presentation here. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is some of the different dimensional regulation controls that the committee is considering based on all of the research that the committee has done, including all of the things that we just heard about with the fiscal impact analysis and the different modeling and all of that. So There are basically 4 dimensional regulation control changes which we are considering. The maximum floor area ratio, which you'll hear referred to as we go through this as the FAR or the FAR, maximum lot coverage, maximum height, and front setbacks. Sorry. Okay, so first one, maximum floor area ratio. So floor area ratio is defined as the floor area divided by the lot area. Currently in Needham, the FAR or the floor area ratio includes the first floor and the second floor. It does not include the basement. It does not include an attic or a third floor, and it does not include up to 600 square feet of garage space. So if you had 650 square foot of garage space, 50 square foot would be included in the FAR calculation, but the first 600 square feet is not counted. But the committee is proposing a definition change to this. So basically the definition change is intended to include any area that is above ground and visible. So what is proposed? The committee is proposing to redefine FAR to include all visible space above grade, i.e. first floor, second floor, third floor or attic space above 5 foot ceiling height, garage, and in certain situations, if you have a lot of exposed basement, part of the exposed basement would be covered. So instead of counting just the first and second floor, just going to use the laser. So right now, if you look in purple on this chart, what's covered, the first floor is covered, second floor is covered, garage is not, third floor is not, and basement is not. What is proposed is everything that is above grade, visible above grade, to be included in the definition of FAR. What are the FAR definitions, dimensional regulations currently? So you'll see, you've seen this chart previously, you'll see it coming up. So the maximum floor area ratio, 0.36, 0.38 for lots less than 12,000 square foot, and is 0.36 for lots greater than 12,000 square foot. That are the current dimensional regulations. One thing you're going to see, and you've heard it already, that we're talking about as we go through this. So FAR and livable are kind of 2 different things, and we've used livable quite a bit as a comparison. Livable area includes the square footage for all finished livable/usable space in a home, including the first floor, the second floor, finished basement, the third floor, and the attic. So it's different to the FAR in that it includes a finished basement, which the vast majority of houses that are being built today, particularly in Needham, they have finished basements. Livable area is what you will typically see on sales data, is what a realtor will use on a house. If you look on Zillow or any of them, when you see the square footage that you see on that is typically the livable square footage, not the FAR square footage. So when we were doing some comparisons, we used the livable because that's the information that's widely available, and that is what you can actually build of finished space in a home. So what the committee has done, we've developed 3 reduction scenarios for review. You can see on the chart here, the dotted black line is what is allowable under Needham's existing current regulations. What you see then, the 3 lines, purple, blue, and yellow below that, are 3 proposed options, which we're referring to as options A, B, and C, which are 3 different reduction scenarios, reducing the allowable size of a house to be built. As you can see here, 45% of the houses of the lots in Needham fall between 10,000 and about 13,000 square foot. So the vast majority of the houses are kind of in this zone here. One other thing that is being proposed is on lot sizes of 15,000 square foot and above, that the committee is proposing that there is a maximum house size. We'll come to that a little bit more later on. But you can see the different size reductions. You've got the lot size across the bottom. You've got the livable area shown here on the side, and it shows you the various different options. This is a slightly different way of looking at it. What we've shown here, and there's a few of these graphs over different lot sizes. So this is on a 7,500 square foot lot. Currently, you can build, again, livable, approximately 4,700 square feet under reduction option A, that will be reduced to 4250. Under reduction B will be reduced to 3935. Under reduction C, 3600 square feet. Again, on a 10,000 square foot lot, currently you are allowed build 6,300. Option A, 49, almost 5,000 square foot. Option B, 4,500. Option C, 4,200. That's on a 10,000 square foot lot. On a 12,000 square foot, 12,500 square foot lot, as you can see, what's allowable is quite significant. Currently is 7,500 square foot livable space. 3 different reductions: A, 5,700, B, 5,100, C, 4,800. And finally, on a 15,000 square foot, right now the allowable would allow you to build somewhere in the region of 9,000 square feet. The option A is reducing that to 6,500, option B 5,800, option C 5,400. What we have created here as well is a town comparison chart. So again, the same towns that were mentioned before: Wellesley, Concord, Lexington, and Newton. Again, what you see here is the existing Needham limit. You can see the other 4 towns in comparison to that. And the green dotted line is showing what option A, reduction option A, would allow across the various different lot sizes. So you can see it's still more permissive than Wellesley, Lexington, a little less than what Newton allows. At the lower lot sizes, it's very comparable with what Newton allows currently. Option B, if you see option A, B, and C, you'll see the dotted green line is reducing slightly each time, and it shows you a comparison of what is allowable in comparison with the other towns that were compared. This is just another graphic, again, for the same thing on a 7,500 square foot lot. So you see option A reducing. It's the same figures as we looked at previously. You've got the different towns. Option B and option C is just another way of looking at it. That's on a 7,500, 10,000 square foot lot, 12,000 square foot, 500 square foot lot, and a 15,000 square foot lot. So right now, under this option A, right now in a 15,000 square foot lot, as we mentioned before, a 9,000 square foot house is allowable currently. The Needham reduction option A would reduce it to 6,400, still larger than all other comparable towns other than Newton. Needham is green. So the Needham line is the green line. Newton is red, Lexington is purple, Concord is blue, and Wellesley is yellow. Just in case I know the writing underneath is quite small.
And the dark blue line is current.
The dark blue line is what's allowable currently in Needham. The green line is what are the potential reduction options. So the committee has been considering a maximum house size cap on lots over 15,000 square feet. What is also being proposed is that if somebody had a legitimate reason for a larger house on a lot size over 15,000 square feet, that a special permit process would be implemented where they could go before the town and present their case and potentially request a larger house. Why propose a maximum house size cap? So this is in an attempt. There are a number of neighbourhoods right throughout Needham where there is a big variance in lot sizes. From the street, those lot sizes might look exactly the same because they have the same frontage. What we have shown here, this is an actual Needham street. If you take a look, you will see each one of these lots has 80 feet of frontage. But if you take a look at the variance in the lot sizes, this lot is 16,000 square feet, this one is 31,000, this one is 33,000. Under current regulations, you could build almost twice the size of house on this lot here that you can build on this lot here, despite the fact that they both have the exact same frontage. So the attempt at doing a maximum house size cap is to control that there are controls that keep this house similar size to adjacent or neighbouring lots. Like I mentioned earlier, the intent would be to have a special permit process that you could appear before the town and present your case. If you have a larger lot than 15,000 square foot, you can request a larger house. We're still working out some of the final criteria that the town would have to consider in that process. So to provide one of the purposes, it will be to provide an opportunity to add additional controls to larger homes through the special permit process. For example, if they did allow you a larger size house, maybe they impose additional landscaping controls. They might control different lighting, different things that could be implemented. Why was 15,000 square foot lot chosen as the maximum? So we took a look at all of the various different lot sizes in town. Considering that we were proposing a special permit process, the intent is not to overburden the town by having a large number of special permit applications. So approximately 15% of the lots in SRB are above 15,000 square feet. The committee feels that the reduction options allow for what is considered, which would be a fairly typical large home in Needham, at that size would be allowable. So the attempt is to minimize the number of people that would be applying or would be going through a special permit process, so as not to overburden the town agency, the town permitting agency. So another one that is being looked at is the maximum lot coverage. What are the lot coverage regulations currently? So they're between 26 and 30% for lots under 7,500 square feet, and they're 25% for all lots above 7,500 square feet. So lot coverage is the total building footprint divided by the lot area. For example, a house with 15,000 square feet on the first floor and 500 square feet of garage has 2,000 total square foot footprint. On a 10,000 lot, that's 2,000 divided by 10,000. It therefore has a lot coverage of 20%, just to help understand it. Needham SRB lots have lot coverage limits of 26 to 30% for lots under 7,500 and 25% for lots over 7,500. What changes are being proposed for lot coverage? The committee is proposing to change lot coverage from a fixed ratio to a sliding ratio based on the lot size. As you've seen previously, it was just 25% for all lots above 7,500. What's being proposed is a sliding scale. A small reduction to current lot coverage allowances is proposed, which favours smaller lots with higher coverage. Here we have some examples. Typically, a lot of homes, especially on the larger lots, are not being built to the current lot coverages. They're being controlled by the FAR before they're being controlled by the lot coverage. On the smaller lots, that's not always the case. But if you see here, so the allowable, this particular lot in this example, these are actual examples of houses that were built. This particular lot, the lot size was 7,828 square feet. The allowable lot coverage was 25%, but it was actually built to 23.5%. So this property did not max out their lot coverage. The reduction, again, there's a whole graph of reduction, but on this particular, the proposed reduction would reduce what's allowable to 23.2%. So that would end up, on this particular house, would end up with a reduction of the footprint of 24 square feet, which is basically minuscule on that one. You go to a larger lot, almost 13,000 square feet. The lot coverage currently is 25%. This was built out at 19.9%, so it didn't come close to the 25%. The proposed reduction would reduce that to 18.1%, which would reduce in a reduction in the house that was built. It would reduce that footprint by 234 square feet. So it's just given two different examples of the impact that a reduction of lot coverage might have on two different lot sizes. So we're back over to another one that we're looking at is height. So Oscar is going to take back over here.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you all for bearing with us. I know there's a lot of detail on these slides, so all of this is available, will be available. We made some slight adjustments to some graphics this afternoon, so you'll have a new updated file of everything you're seeing tonight available, probably tomorrow morning. I'm not gonna overpromise for Alex over there. As Paul was describing, the committee has looked at a couple of different ways that we could think about controls. You've heard about FAR, you've heard about lot coverage, they kind of work together. Another thing that we kind of came to discuss in a lot of detail with the committee was height. And in all of, as I mentioned before, we literally surveyed 32 houses, did drive-bys, did surveys, and talked a lot about how we felt about those 32 houses. And in kind of a third of those houses were too big, too tall. Another third was, well, they seem okay, but the still feels a little tall. And then there were another third that were fine. People didn't really have any objection to those as being in the neighborhood. And so out of this, we looked at how we might adjust the height. And so we came to the conclusion that a modest adjustment, the current height allowed in Needham is 35. And one of the things we thought would be important is to think about, as you can see here, this is the current zoning chart, and 35 is the maximum allowable height to the ridge. We thought that it would be potentially a good idea to bring a slight adjustment down on that ridge. And we also felt it should be it should be considered to not dramatically change what a builder might want to build as a floor to floor or a 3-story house or 2-story house. And so we thought that typically all of those potential taller ceilings on the first and second floor would be quite doable. Even with an attic, it's habitable in 33 feet. And again, that sort of plays out over a couple of other measurements. That on a sloping site, the maximum height would go from 41 to 39. There was another idea that we felt was important from some of the surveying of houses around Needham, that on the sides of these houses where they were typically being built to the setbacks, that the size of that house next to another house was probably a really close proximity. There was an awareness and a sensitivity that we might want to take a look at creating another height limitation there. And so you'll see, these are some diagrams of the first height, which was essentially saying going from 35 to 33 on a relatively gentle slope or flat site. On a steeper slope, you have that potential of a 3-story experience. So that's been capped at 41 currently, and that would change to 39 to the maximum height of the house. And then this is a new diagram that is showing you that the potential on a side would try and limit the size of this house to essentially being a 2-story wall. And then above that 2-story wall would be a gable or potentially dormers above that. But again, it would essentially be where the top of the flat wall would stop. And that also kind of looks like this. So these are a couple of house drawings that show what a potential on the left would be, which we think is something we would prefer to not allow that happen, because that's essentially a 3-story house on the side of the lot, which would be pretty overwhelming in conjunction, especially on smaller lots, but in general, a very close proximity to 3 stories. And you can see on the right that essentially there's a 2-story house, and then you have a gable or 2 gables that could break that line. The other issue that we thought was worth talking about was a front setback. And there is a current bylaw that allows an SRB to have a minimum lot setback of 20. The thing that's fascinating, and I'm sure many of you are intuitively understand that there's houses that seem to be set back a little bit further than that around town. And in fact, that's kind of a sensitivity that we thought was important to bring out. So we thought that we would come up with call this an average neighborhood front setback, and that this would be an opportunity for, if you had neighborhoods where there were houses that were set back more than 20 feet, they actually had a kind of neighborhood character, a different street character, and that we could acknowledge that and create a bylaw for that. And so this is just a little snapshot of our town. You can see the drive into the high school on Kingsbury. You can go down to May, and then you can look at Fair Oaks. And those, if I was to just do a very rough calculation of all of the frontages along those streets, you can see pretty dramatically that there's likely to be a range that's quite a bit above 20 feet. So what we are proposing to do here is to come up with a bylaw that would say that in the district, no proposed dwelling may have a setback less than the average setback of the existing dwelling located within 200 feet on each side of this proposed dwelling, which was essentially a couple of lots on either side. And that you would take the average of all of that and you would come up with the setback. So we thought that was a pretty reasonable thing to do, and that it would be something worth doing, because it's a sort of a respectful way of keeping the character of the neighborhoods. We think that's a pretty valuable thing to think about. So just a couple more slides, and then we can get to the important part, which is talking with you guys. This is a chart that we thought would be interesting to explain the issue that some people had questions about. What would happen if I have a house and I want to do an addition? What is this potential bylaw reduction change going to do to me? And I think what we didn't do here is a rather dense chart again. We looked at, you can see an A, B, C, and then you can see at the bottom, there's a series of numbers. And so there are lot columns, 7,500 square foot lot, 10,000 square foot lot, 12,515. And then you're going to see the reductions as a percentage, and then the reductions as a square foot. And so what you need to understand is this is an existing Cape. That's a roughly 2,000 square foot house. And everything on the right is actually additional square footage that you could add to that 2,000 square foot house. So if you just go across and look at that middle reduction B, sorry. That's right. There we go. So you can see coming across in B that, for instance, in that 10,000 square foot lot, a 2,000 square foot house could have a 2,500 square foot addition. So that's a 4,500 square foot house, and so on, and across the board. So again, I think this was helpful for us to be able to explain that there is not necessarily a dramatic impact on those who are concerned about doing an addition. And in fact, many of the other issues are going to come into play with triggering a stretch code over a certain size addition. You're going to have to bring the entire house up to a certain code, a certain level of energy performance. Stormwater regs are going to get triggered. And so you may have the new construction definition, which if you would take down more than 50% and replace more than 50%, you're going to get triggered as a new construction. So bottom line is there's a great deal of range in here from what would be a small house to be able to be built with addition options. So in conclusion, you've heard a lot, but this is kind of the four chunks of areas that we've been focusing on, which was basically changing the FAR definition from what's currently counting one first floor, second floor, changing that to count what's above ground, visible first, second, and third in garage, lot coverage. Again, I think the important thing, we didn't really talk about this, but the current FAR is kind of strange. You have two ratios and they change at 12,000 square feet. What we're trying to do here, we learned a little bit from Concord, is to create a formula that calculates your actual FAR based on your lot size. So every single lot will have its own FAR calculated. So you're essentially creating a ratio that's tied to the lot size. And then we also figured we were going to try and create put our finger on the scale and say, for the smaller lots, we're going to bump it up in the FAR to give them a little more bulk on the house on smaller lots, because there are more challenges. And then as that goes up to larger lots, the FAR would come down. So there's essentially a favored slope. And you saw those slopes back at the beginning. There was a slope up to the 15 and then a cap. So you can imagine that there are three of those diagonals that essentially give benefit to the lower lots, smaller lots, and then they sort of pinch down on the upper lots up to the 15,000 square foot lot. On the lot coverage, same thing. We thought it was important to not just have this 25% in perpetuity, we thought it was helpful because we actually saw the coverage was being underused. So we closed that down a little bit, and then again created a slope that was favorable to smaller lots with more coverage. Height, you heard us talk about that. There's some ways to try and diminish that height or bring it down just a little bit without imposing too much of a hardship on the actual construction of what seemed to be, which are taller houses today. Setbacks, again, just briefly, that was just considering that there are some neighborhood characters with greater than 20-foot setbacks that we think are valuable, and we should think about that with a bylaw. And thank you very much for your patience for going through all that. And we are very anxious to hear all your thoughts. And so please,
Thank
I will
you.
pass this on to Artie. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. My name is Artie Crocker. I'm the co-chair of the committee along with Mo Handel. I'd like to thank Oscar, Eric, and Paul for their, and as well as Mo for the presentation right now. And just to make sure you know that we have not taken any type of final vote of what we'd like to do as we hand it off to the planning board itself. So your input is valuable. We will decide after tonight when we hand it off to the planning board. Even then, the planning board will then have, I think, up to 3 public meetings for additional input before that is the final wording is drawn up, which will then be presented at the May town meeting. So we'd like to open up for public comment now. When you come up, please give your name and your address, and we welcome your questions. So please come on up to the mic, and anyone online as well. What? Yeah, questions. I thought I said questions, but yeah, any questions you have, please come on up to the mic, and anyone online. Again, please give your name and your address as well.
My name is Jody Benjamin. My address is 155 Mark Tree Road. It's a smaller house on Mark Tree Road, and I'm astonished that my 1,200 square foot house could possibly be a 4,000 square foot house, but there we go. I'm a little disappointed in some of the fiscal calculations that you've done, that you haven't included some of the externalities of what these houses impose on the rest of us. For example, a big house has a lot of impermeable surface, yeah?
Closer to the microphone, please.
Closer? Okay. A lot of impermeable surface and therefore a lot of water runoff. That water runoff is a cost to those of us left behind in these smaller houses that are older. Our basements flood. And I have to tell you, I never told the town of Needham or any of the people in the big houses that my basement was their reservoir. It's a cost to us, people left behind, to fix some of the problems that they're creating for us. Not only that, but all this water runoff, our water system can't handle this. The stormwater runoff does not handle this. It floods houses, it goes down the streets, it clogs up. And none of these costs have been included in your calculations. So I'm a little disappointed in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is anyone online, Alex? And one thing I did not say, if possible, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And if we have time, we will, circle back around. You can come up again. But again, we will be here until you're finished here with your questions. You're welcome and all. Yeah, Irene.
You just want to say that there is a tree in the stormwater.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, there is a tree committee and there is a stormwater committee. That stormwater committee has already passed something at town meeting. So we are looking at other aspects of what's happening on different lots and the impact on the neighbors and the impact on the environment. And so we are taking a look at those. But I do appreciate your comment earlier about that, the impact on large houses in the neighborhood and the neighboring houses as well. Thank you. But so Irene is online. Yeah, Irene, please state your full name and your address, please.
Hi, Irene Berlinski. I'm at 96 Gay Street. So thank you very much to everyone on this board for all the hard work and the many hours I know went into this. I have a question about one of the last elements you mentioned. I don't know if I'm going to get the right term. The setback in the front area. You mentioned that there would be an average ratio used for the houses on that street or in that neighborhood, which makes sense. But what if half of those houses, have already been built to be, maybe much bigger than the lot would allow? Would that be part of the average? And if so, might that skew the intent?
Thank you, Irene. I appreciate that. I believe that those existing houses would be part of the average. And so would they skew it? Yes, they would skew it, but it would still, that the new house would still be a larger setback than the ones that are built closer already. So yes, they will skew it, but the existing houses will skew it back. I'm not sure how it's phrased, but you're correct. They will be part of the whole calculation. I don't think there's anything else to say to that. Oscar, I think well said with that, right? Okay, thank you, Irene.
Thank you.
Anyone else online? Anyone in the audience, please?
Hi, I'm Nick Hill, 7 Needhamdale Road. I just, first of all, thanks for all the work you've done. It's mind-boggling. What struck me, the fiscal analysis surprised me, but I was also thinking how that really, it may depress the market for teardowns, but to me, that seems like a good thing, because if you've got a ranch house, it might skew towards a rebuild or somebody adding on. So I think that I looked at that analysis and that potential loss of revenue as a real asset, because it propels people to keep the houses, add on to them as needed. So just a thought. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it.
Good evening. Dave Weinberg, 41 Colonial Road.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Dave Weinberg. So I want to thank the committee for the incredible work you've done. I'm very impressed by the data that you've generated and the number of issues you've considered. The number of considerations you have to make this decision about how to reduce the zoning restrictions is really incredible. But I just wanted to say that from my perspective, the most important decision in each one of these points will be the quality of life in Needham. The preservation of starter homes it seems to me to be a critical thing. It's really hard to imagine a young family coming into Needham right now and competing with developers for these smaller houses. And unfortunately, I think right now there's kind of a perverse incentive for people not to maintain small homes. They're going to be teardowns. I've heard people say, why should I make an investment in this house? It's just going to be a teardown anyway. So I think we want to change that mentality and try and preserve some of these starter homes for people with younger families and smaller needs. That's one thing. Another thing is the preservation of the communities, the character of the neighborhoods. Our neighborhood, Colonial Road, has changed quite dramatically in the 40 years I've been there. And I think we need to recognize that it's important to some of us that the character of these neighborhoods has some continuity. Things are going to change. Change is essential. But it's changing at a pace that maybe exceeds what we want for Needham, what I'd like to see for Needham. So thanks very much, and I appreciate very much your efforts.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. Is someone online, Alice?
Yes,
Oh,
hi, this is Alice Demner. I'm at 23 Henderson Street in Needham, a street in which we've seen a lot of really big houses built on smaller houses that were owned for many years by people and who passed it from one generation to the other. And I wanted to say I appreciate very much the consideration of these changes. And at the beginning, I was thinking that maybe they didn't go far enough, but it seems to me that the first one on changing how the far to the livable space is going to be make a big difference, because see on our street that several of the houses have huge third floors and livable basements with actual windows and apartments in them. So I think that's really important. One question that I had was, is each of the elements that you are thinking about proposing going to be voted on separately eventually by the planning board and the town meeting, or is it a package that's going to be presented so that all of these things are changed.
Thank you, Alice. And before I answer that, the audio people, could you see if there's any adjustments you can make to these? Some of this we're having a little bit of a hard time hearing. Sometimes a little bounce off feedback. But Alice, to answer your question again, thank you for the question. We haven't decided how we're going to do it, but I understand back in 2017 when there was a zoning change, then it was presented on a piece by piece basis where the town meeting could vote on it. And will we do the same thing here? We may very well be doing that, but we haven't decided anything yet. And again, we as the committee are presenting it to the planning board. I'm the chair of the planning board, but we are presenting it to the planning board. The planning board would be the ones that make the decision of how it's being presented at town meeting. But yes, we will take that up, and thank you for that comment, Alex. I appreciate it very much. Yes, Mary?
I do want to say to everybody here tonight that the committee is very interested actually in your feedback about whether you have any preference or sense of how you feel about reduction 1, 1.5, 2, 3. Where do you feel in that range that was presented to you that feels like it might make sense? We're really interested in hearing about that from you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And again, as we're saying, we haven't voted. So again, your questions, your comments make a big difference to us. And so again, giving us feedback and emails, even comments tonight of what you think is your preference will make a difference in how we're filing, like what we hand off to the planning. But thank you very much. So Ken, why don't you give your name and address, please?
Hi, my name is Ken Buckley. I live on Warren Street, Precinct G. I had like 8 questions, but I'm trying to pick. Probably want to start with just the thought. When the regulations changed in 2016, 2017, I really liked the town by town comparison. Was such a comparison done at that time to see that we might in fact look at 9,000 square foot homes compared to our neighboring towns, or have the neighboring towns maybe changed their rules just prior to us considering it. So they had large houses as well, and then have since backed off. Anybody can answer that very quickly?
We know, Mary?
I would say we didn't look at it at that time because a couple of things. Wellesley existed at that time, but other towns did not. The feedback from developers about the Wellesley system at that time was they were very frustrated with it. They've clearly since learned how to navigate their way through the TLAG system that Wellesley had. Wellesley Systems does control just for the visible portion of the site. Okay, so a lot of what feeds into the very large number that you're thinking about is basement, right? And the fact that we weren't counting the 3rd floor, but Wellesley's formula in fact already controlled for that. Ours didn't. I think Newton came afterwards. Other towns came after this because houses were just starting to be rebuilt in some different ways.
And 1 second, Lee, you would like to do it this answer?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I hear what Mary Ann said because I was talking to someone else at the time, but actually I was working with the committee at the time, and Wellesley had introduced its regulation. But a lot of towns were struggling with the issue of large houses around the same time, and we're all kind of exploring regulatory strategies to address it. Needham was just one at the time. So Concord was looking at options, Lexington was looking at options, and we all kind of landed where we landed.
Okay, so to quickly summarize, I think what I'm hearing is that kind of all the neighboring towns have been struggling with it. And what I view as kind of a dramatic difference being displayed is really because they maybe went first in trying to bring it back into smaller zones.
I think they just made different choices at the time, and they were willing to, and they made different policy choices at the time. Some of them were willing to go farther than others.
Right.
And in
Okay.
fact, some discussions with their officials are also indicating that either they just made an adjustment, they haven't seen the results of it yet, or they're actually planning on making an adjustment because they see some workarounds and they think
sure.
they're still too large. So
Yeah. I'm speaking.
I would say in general, all the other towns were more dramatic in their controls, and they're also evaluating and making adjustants. So it, again, I think we're.
So they might bump theirs up a bit.
No, Newton is actually doing something for a slight reduction.
Okay, got it.
Everything's
They're
going
allowable.
Everything's going down.
And then very quickly, again, I don't want to monopolize, but if the goal is to keep residents in town and keep the town affordable, I'm echoing a bit about what David Weinstein just said. If that's part of a goal, then I would, one of the things that I heard Oscar mention earlier was specifically around stretch goals. And so if you try to do an expansion, add an addition, at some point there's a trigger. I'm not sure what the trigger is, but if we wanted to try to keep people in their homes or maintain their homes and maybe bump them out a bit or have somebody come in and say, the house is a little small for us, but if we try to go and extend it, we're going to have to pay a lot more. Would it be good to try to look at that to maintain some of the existing housing stock? That's kind of a comment, I would say. Because I think I'm with David in terms of trying to keep more of the homes that are more affordable. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Ken.
Can I just address that? Because a lot of the stretch code and a lot of that sort of stuff is state mandated rather than town mandated. So the town doesn't have a huge level of control over some of that. Just to clarify that.
But I do think it's actually a state, there's an awareness at the state level. And they did make an adjustment in HERS rating so that they've actually allowed, even though there's a tipping point at 1,000 square feet for an addition, that you have to bring the house up to a certain rating from an energy point of view. They reduced the target for that energy reduction recently at the state level. So they're aware as a state that they're asking a lot with that first decision. And now they're backing that down. I think you're also asking, is there a relief on allowing maybe 1,500 square feet before you start triggering something?
I'm just saying, let's try to keep more of the housing stock intact.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, I don't know whether it really enters into is, but the opt-in stretch goals that the town has done, I think that's under our control, not so much, but now we're kind of splitting hairs in terms of opt-in versus what the thresholds are, et cetera. But really would like to try to take a look at what the town can do to maintain some of the affordability.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
And just, we're under no delusion that this will make this will change necessarily affordability. We're doing something to reduce house sizes, and some of that may all of a sudden the side effect may be some houses will now be sold to end users versus a builder and torn down. We don't know for a fact. But again, our goal is to reduce the bulk of the houses. Again, the affordability factor, I'm not looking for that to make a big change in Needham. Needham's houses are expensive and they're always going to be expensive, but maybe some houses can go to some end users. And so some people can get a foothold into Needham, perhaps. That would be nice. Anyone else online, Alex? Next, please. Name and address, please.
My name is Jeremy Fazette. I live at 43 Hunting Road. And you kind of stole a bit of my thunder right there with that last comment. First of all, to Ken and Dan. David, thank you. So I agree. I'm also very concerned about the character of our town. I moved from Newton. My wife and I lived there for 10 years, and then we spent 8 of those years looking for a new town to live into. And we looked at Concord, Dover, went as far as Franklin, but we all fell in love with Needham. And so there was a 3-year search for a house to get us here to Needham. We love the character, we love the nature of it. And I still work in Newton, so I drive through Newton every single day. And I can tell you that Needham is still today, even with some of the houses that are being built, still a premium town as far as we're concerned. And also the data and the analytics prove out on that. When I was here last time, I presented how Needham was one of the fastest growing towns in this country in terms of its financial aptitude and also in terms of its wealth. And that's a credit to pretty much this town, the residents, the board, and all the things that we do, we instill in here with our values. My concern, though, is how much of this housing reduction is actually going to solve some of the problems that I'm hearing, which are, again, the affordability, which you just mentioned, because over the US consensus says in the last 10 years, housing sizes have gone down by 9%, but prices have gone up by 49%. So there's no data that's been presented here tonight, nor what you just said is actually going to solve the affordability with houses here and make that entry level for young families who want to move into a nice town more plausible. In terms of the fiscal work done that was phenomenal work done. And I feel it's really kind of hammered home exactly what the end cost, the end results are going to be from reducing this potentially in terms of like income tax rate into the town, and the fiscal viability of the town is going to be hurt. So the fact that the 10,000 square foot that you brought up, it's gonna, the people who are gonna be hurt most are the people who are not of the elite wealth in this town. The people who are gonna be hurt and crushed the hardest are gonna be the people with those homes who may be looking for an opportunity to, say, move out, move to a better retirement facility, move down to Florida to live with their kids and their grandkids. And that's gonna actually impact them harder than it would at the people who are at that 1.5 to $3 million house range. So I think that's got to be a consideration. Again, what are we trying to solve for with this housing reduction? I do strongly agree, because I don't want to take up too much more time, because I do, like you said, I have a lot of questions here. I do have, I love the wall, the 3-wall height, to try and improve the architecture, because architecture is a huge problem, I think, with some of these new houses. It's not really fitting the vibe of Needham whatsoever. The colonials and Victorians are giving away for these flat face houses. And I have just images of houses just behind my neighborhood that appear to be in violation of existing code. So I was wondering if special permits are being given to them. Like I have a house here, 11 Fay. It's got a 72% lot ratio right now, house to lot ratio. That seems to be well in excess of what you've already presented as a current code here. And there's 4 other houses like that too. There's one on Greendale. It lights up the neighborhood like a beacon when you're, in the middle of the night with the way it's all set up with the glass facing. I think that 3-wall height thing is going to help out with that. But in terms of just blanketly stating, well, houses are just too big. I mean, I'm not going to necessarily disagree with that local sentiment, but it's arbitrary. And I just want to know what we're actually trying to solve for. So I strongly want to urge that we're very cautious with how much, if we choose to go ahead and reduce sizes of towns, what are we looking to yield from it, and how much do we want to do it by? Again, the 3-wall height concept, I think, is really smart because it will help maintain character of Needham.
Thank you. Anyone online, Alex? Yep. Lou, name and address, please.
Lou Wolfson, 29 Semino Road. First, this has nothing to do with this. I just feel there's so many committees here in town. 1, 2, too many people on these committees, serving too many committees that may impact their impartial votes. 3,
Hey, Lou,
I have another question.
Lou, could you get a little
Oh,
closer?
sorry, you want closer?
Yeah, get a
Okay.
little closer and just.
Sorry.
Just for an update.
3, there are too many people.
Audio here is a little closer, just.
Closer. 3, there are too many people here in town trying to live their lives and make ends meet to follow any of these committees in spite of all the outreach until decisions are made, and then they are outraged. So this goes for all the committees here in town that I've seen. Many committee members also on town meeting members making a vote in opposition, starting at a deficit. Doesn't matter which committee or which vote. So that's just another issue that I'm speaking about. That said, I want to commend this committee on the outreach it's done, both to the public as well as to the builders and all the financial aspects of it. As far as I had some questions regarding the financial aspects of it that really haven't been addressed at all. And that is it's going to be an inconsequential effect of bringing these homes down if in fact we do. So if we go to a 4,000 square foot home, and there are other 3,000 to 4,000 square foot homes on that street that have been renovated, with a new kitchen or a new bath, and their assessments at $1.7 million, and you're putting a home up that's going to be $2.9 million, $2.7 million, $3 million. It's going to bring all those mid-price, quote, mid-price $1.7 million homes. The taxes are going to go skyrocketing, and that hasn't even been addressed at all. Let's see. Also, I had some questions regarding the setbacks. We talked about the 20-foot setbacks possibly. And how does that address on the corner lots? Right now, I believe those are 25 feet on each side. street side, and I don't think that's been addressed. Hopefully it's not going to be, or are they going to benefit from that? Setbacks on the side and rear weren't discussed, so I assume those aren't being changed. Okay. Also the height, 33, 35, that's not going to make a big difference one way or another, even though, some of our stately homes here are 33 feet, 35 feet, some might even be a bit larger. As far as the options go, I think that we should all have our inherent property rights. But if I had to choose, I would say that the option A, is a reduction, but one that won't adversely affect all the, blended families here in town, the families that have 3, 4, 5 children, the one that have parents that come from outside the area that may stay for a long time, people that have 2 or 3, two offices in their homes today. So I think those also have to be taken into consideration. As far as affordability, nothing is affordable anymore, unfortunately, and it's not going to get any more affordable. Everyone's taxes are going to go up no matter what we do. We have a lot of infrastructure that our town needs, and hopefully it will get done. So, I appreciate all the efforts that the committee has made, and hopefully there'll be some improvements made that will help everybody here in town.
Thank you, Lou. I see that we have, what is that? Priscilla online now? Priscilla, Alex is going to bring you over. Please state your full name and address, please. She's declining, okay. Okay, is anyone else in the audience? Yeah, Louise, welcome. Your name and address, please.
Yep, Louise Miller, 5 North Hill Avenue. I think that there are a couple of things that we should think about as we look at this large house review. First of all, and I'll say right off, I'm one of those people who simply doesn't care. Like, large houses aren't offensive to me. The fact that some are closer to the sidewalk, some are further away, I view that as interesting, not necessarily as problematic. So I don't have that, aesthetically, this is not appealing to me. But I do think if what we are concerned about is, setbacks, then let's change the setbacks. If you really think the houses are too tall, make them shorter, whatever. But I don't think that we have actually done a full fiscal analysis. There were a number of slides, and they were in your packets regarding what we think is going to happen to the value of the properties. And there still are 2 parts to the fiscal analysis. Part 1, and I'm going to set aside the developers, whether or not developers and contractors can make money, I think is irrelevant. It's not our job as a town to help contractors and developers make money. Sorry, developers. But I do think it is important for us to protect the residents and taxpayers of town today. And it is also important for us to protect our tax base and our tax revenue. So when we look at the value of the homes, there are 2 pieces to it. One is, what is the current value of the home? And 2, what is the new growth of the home if it is torn down and a new house comes on and becomes part of our property tax base? And the 2 effects are, let's say right now, Needham's property tax base is $1 billion, and our tax rate is $10 per 1,000. If you reduce the value of homes so that our overall valuation goes down to $800,000, $800 million, I'm just talking round numbers. So it goes down 20%, the tax rate has to go up to match the tax revenue that we take in. Tax revenue will not go down as a result of values going down. Tax revenue will be raised at the same level. We simply will raise the tax rate. Now, what Needham has been counting on every year in order to make in order to have 4% increases in our budget is that new growth. And that portion of the new growth that is most dependable is the residential new growth. And I know in a couple of weeks, we'll get new numbers from the assessors. I think we should make sure we incorporate those in terms of what's going on with commercial and industrial to see how the shift is among the residential. But if we affect our new growth, we're affecting what our increase in revenue is. Therefore, we're affecting what the budget is that the town can spend. And then the second thing is we're shifting the value of the houses. So as new homes come on and these older properties do increase in value, but they don't increase in value as much as the new homes. So if we reduce the new growth and also reduce the value of the new homes, we're going to end up shifting more of the tax burden onto the smaller homes. And that has happened already. We have seen really large increases in the tax burden for the smaller homes. And I hope that whoever is here from the select board does ask the Board of Assessors when they come in for their presentation what the average increases were in tax rate for the smaller homes. So I think we do need to do a little bit more in terms of that fiscal analysis. And then the other thing I will say is we do hear that there are stormwater issues as a result of the building of houses in the last how many ever years. This is not going to solve that problem. I think that if we want to go back and solve the increase in stormwater issues and the flooding in neighboring homes, then we need to go back and see what houses were built and what the town can do and how we can encourage those homes or maybe require those homes to have better stormwater. But it is not going to solve the problems of the last 15 years. The increase in stormwater is a result of the building of large homes. What will is the stormwater bylaw that we recently passed, the stormwater regulations that are going to come out of this. And I've always been a big proponent of stormwater bylaws and stormwater regulations. So I think all of that is great. But I think we do need a little bit more fiscal analysis. Thank you.
Thanks,
I was very carefully reviewing notes of our prior community meeting where you made similar comments about new growth. And I just wanted to seek clarification because I know if we have new growth, the 2.5% limit on what we can tax, we have the opportunity to increase because of the new growth. It hadn't occurred to me that replacing a small house with a bigger house is the kind of new growth that increases so that we are able to increase it. But you're suggesting that, or you know that it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
So
see.
if in fiscal 23, property is worth $1 million, it gets torn down, and in fiscal 24, the property sells for $2.7 million. We now have $1.7 million of new growth.
Very good. I'm glad I sought clarification because I wanted to understand that. I kind
Yeah.
of imagined, if a commercial building got torn down and a new one got up, oh boy, that's new growth. But it hadn't occurred to me that
It's
was
the
true
delta.
of these single family homes.
Yes.
That's what's called the opportunity cost in the fiscal analysis. It's part of the analysis.
Whose opportunity cost?
I'm not sure you were here when the fiscal analysis was presented. It was on that one of the.
On that slide,
Yeah.
which is the same slide I think that you have online, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I understood that differently, but.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. We're not debating. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're again, we're not delusional as far as we think this is going to create affordable houses in Needham. And we do believe that there may be some impact on the houses that would be available now to end users. There'd be some increase in houses that may be available to end users, which does have an impact on the demographics as far as maybe a little bit more variety of the demographics. I mean, there is value in the character of a town as far as creating a variety of who's here and what size houses there are. I mean, I suppose, imagine being in a neighborhood where they're all 6,000 square foot houses and they're all 25 feet from each other or something to that effect. I mean, the other towns have kept value perhaps because they've understood character of the town. They want to keep some type of character in the town. And again, it would be nice to have homes that are available to people that they can move into Needham and build some equity in town. That's how I did that in town. I was born in the town. I bought the house next to my parents' house, and I built it up over time. That's how I was able to afford to buy into Needham. And it'd be nice to have something in the future where maybe some of our kids to buy into Needham as well. I don't know what possibility that exists, but it would be nice to keep some possibility. As far as the large houses, no, is this going to solve the stormwater issues? No, but any decrease in the size of the houses increases, it helps. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps with the environment. Every little bit helps with increased possibility of trees and so forth. But every little bit helps. That's all we're trying to do as far as part of that.
May I just make one more comment about the term diversity that we use? I'm not exactly sure what we're talking about. I think if what you're saying is you want to see more income diversity by maintaining smaller homes, I understand that. But in the last 15 to 20 years, I think we've seen big growth in other types of diversity in Needham. So I don't think we should play that down at all.
Well, no, there's many different demographics, parts of demographics. I agree with that. That's just part of it. Just part of it. Any other questions? Anyone online else? Priscilla, please come on over and state your full name and address, please, Priscilla.
Okay, I'm not used to doing this. Priscilla Khan at 19 Oak Knoll Terrace. And I came into the meeting late, so this may have been addressed. I was wondering about the ADUs that are now by state law, I believe, allowable, cannot be considered not. And was this addressed at all as far as these tear downs and also the bigger houses being built? That would they be allowed to add on their property an ADU, regardless of their building to the maximum size of the lot currently?
Thank you, Priscilla. Yeah, ADUs by state law are allowed. Detached ADUs are allowed, and we do not get to regulate them, although they do have to fit within the lot coverage in the lot's FAR as well. They can be closer to the setback depending on their height. But this large house we are not regulating ADUs because again, that is not our purview there, and they are allowed by state law, the detached ADUs, and they're allowed within the house themselves. They just have to, if they're within the house, they're part of the FAR. They're not part of it.
They're actually the current thinking, I think, is that they are going to be a bonus. So that they're not to be considered as you don't have any trying to limit the barriers to doing them. They are, I think the way it's going to come down at a state level is that they are not to be included in FAR coverage, that they are considered to be a bonus because it's an incentive to have ADUs being built.
I just want to be clear that this committee is not focused at all on ADUs. And there are going to need to be some changes to the ADU zoning regulations in the town based on the changes at the state level. That will be a completely different discussion. And there are some just requirements that we will need to make. But again, that's not this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. Anyone else in the audience? Jeff?
Jeff Heller, 1092 Central Avenue. Thank you for your work here. I listen here and think, again, why are we here? We're here to do something. We could sit there and say, oh, we need more numbers. We got to evaluate this. for that. And I think, no, I think it's time we did something. We've been wanting to do something. This community's wanted to do something for a long time. And so now you're coming up with some proposals. And, you know, the numbers you present is what we've asked for. We have to make some choices. We have that, you know, the opposition things of where the trade-offs. You know, now you've presented choices. Everybody knows how I feel. I'm for the most restrictive, biggest reduction one for that. But of course, the trade-off is we have to look out for other people that might impact and financially around the value of their house. So I'm open to, I would really choose more of the middle to take in consideration of that balance of keeping some of the value, but we got to expect that there's going to be a market correction. You know, as we become as less permissive and get on an even par with our surrounding communities, you know, the big demand, you know, everyone's going to want to move to Needham. It's a very attractive town, as people have talked about, and continue to grow. But right now, we're an open market. Builders come here first, you know, and because we have available property and more and less restrictions, so they can make more money here easily. They'll make their money, you know, if we put in these restrictions. Still, you showed it up there, right? Now you put on a sliding scale around lot coverage, you know, based on that, you know, I strongly feel like you put a graph there for a 7,500 square foot lot and allow. I don't remember what the allowance is, but no one should be building a house 4,000 square feet or larger in a 7,500 square foot lot. Let's be honest about that. And that's where our affordable housing's going. That's where our stormwater flowing into other properties is going. That's where our trees are all going, because you got to just, you know, rape the lot to get in and shoehorn a house in there. So let's be reasonable, right? Let's put reasonable houses on small lots, you know, the larger houses on their bigger lots. And that's what all our restrictions do. I don't want to suggest complicating things by doing that sliding scale on, you know, on FAR or the other controls. But by rights, we really should. And you didn't mention, like, Wellesley and what they have, the review, you know, a review board, you know, and on that. And I think, you know, I mean, that's a sort of some way a simpler, complicated solution for us is when we say, how do we keep our houses from being not with the character in the neighborhood, and give some sort of kind of subjective review by communities. Again, we got to keep it simple, but let's everybody consider what all these trade-offs are, what all these complications are, all the difficult choices that you sort of had to make to present this and give the town some choices. So thank you for giving us choices. And, you know, again, I think lean toward the middle, just so some controls. I'd love to see you guys do something around maintaining smaller lots, you know, and those knockdowns, because that's where our affordable stock is going away, because it becomes and that's where renovations can happen and where they're not happening, because builders come in and just say, oh, we can build on a 7,500 square foot lot. Let's do it. No other town lets us do that, you know? So boom, there they go. All the small houses, all the houses for kids, starter families, starter homes. There's no starter homes in Needham anymore. That's what's, you know, so let's maybe try to do that correction. And let's be comfortable with our market correction when the values go down and we come and we're on an even par with other towns, you know, because we can come up with arguments galore for all the resistance to change, all the people who don't want to see this change, or after my payday, you know, I'll agree to these regulations. The time to do something is now. And for all those people who have to make some compromises, that's for the betterment of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Al? Say Garrett? Gary, you're online? Please state your full name and address, please. Gary, I can't hear you. We can't hear you. We lost Gary, I believe. Until he's back, is there anyone else online, Alex? Chris, you're being pulled over. Please state your full name and address, please, Chris.
Are you all able to hear me?
Yes, Chris, we can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Chris Costopoulos, 11 Bradford Street. As it relates to loss of revenue from houses that won't be torn down and the lower revenue from houses that are torn down but will have a lower assessed value, to reiterate what Luis said, the burden will fall on existing residents, and with increased taxes, that'll make it less affordable to move into this town, thus counteracting any aspect of affordability, which I understand is not the primary focus here. In terms of height, even Newton allows for a 36-foot height currently, and we're lower than that now and proposing to go even lower. And my concern there is the lower height will force new houses that will now be built to be more modern and unsightly. They're not, it'll actually do the opposite of maintaining the character of our town, but will actually force people to build what I would consider uglier houses. And my question to you, but so those are my comments. My question is, you looked at a lot of the neighboring towns, and did you isolate for the neighboring town zoning that it considers that the other towns have a larger percentage of larger lots as compared to Needham, which has a larger percentage of 7 to 15,000 square foot lots? So even though they have a more stringent rule as compared when looking at similar size lots, as a percentage, is it similar to ours? And I based on what I know, it doesn't seem that it is.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to have Oscar and possibly Paul answer this because they were digging into that data as more than most of us.
Thank you all. Appreciate your
thanks,
hard
Chris.
work.
We intentionally picked all of the neighboring towns, districts that were directly related to our 10,000, generally our 10,000 square foot districts, which is our SRB. So yes, we used all of the pertinent districts in those surrounding towns to get the best, most accurate on point comparisons.
But as a percentage, did they have, like the slide showed that we have about 45% of Needham's lots in that 7 to 15,000 square foot size? What about their percentages as overall for their whole town? Are they similar in 45%, or are they 10 or 15 so they can be more stringent with those sizes?
They were smaller. They had smaller components or the smaller percentages of those smaller lots.
So I think that should be taken into consideration as well, because the character of those towns are different.
Needham does have more smaller lots than any other town.
So we're going more stringent as a percent for a larger percentage than they are, where they have a much smaller percentage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can debate it either way. I think the adjustments that we're proposing are to essentially allow FARs to continue to grow, but we're just reducing the whole measurement of houses to bring it down into a more, the options for A, B, and C were to bring it down into a bracketing kind of a reasonable range of a house size that was somewhere relative to the other towns, if you look at those charts.
I appreciate that, but as a percentage, they seem to have the opportunity to still build larger houses in those other areas that we're not considering, because we only really have SRA, SRB, and GR, where they likely, Wellesley has, I think it's S10, S15, S20, so they have the ability to control and build larger houses as a percentage, where we don't have that opportunity here in Needham.
Well, we still have SRA. So I mean, right now we're only looking at SRB.
No, I understand that, but as a percentage, SRA is very small.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I appreciate that.
Thank you all.
Thank you. I didn't read it up there. Says, please forgive me, my microphone technical problem. My question is this, when I spoke to her, when I spoke to Marianne a number of years ago, and she had indicated that the tear down acceleration was an unintended consequence of the 2017 rezoning. So my question is, have we studied the list of potential unintended consequences with any change being proposed? Again, sorry for my audio issue. So have we studied any potential issues by our rezoning here? Have we thought about it? Yes.
An observation.
Yeah, please do, Marion.
About intended consequences is you don't know what they are. All right, but it is fair to say that at this point in time, there's a lot more examples out there of what's gone on in different communities, including our own. And so we have talked about all of those, I think, pretty extensively. I just want to note that I appreciate Louise's comment earlier about the impact on smaller lots. And I just want to put some things together. Again, unintended consequences, right? Many of these smaller lots are currently have smaller homes on them. They may be 3-bedroom homes, a bath and a half, you know, something like that. But in fact, the program that was designed that now fits on any of these lots is a 4-bedroom home with at least a couple of bathrooms and 2-car garage and all of that. So what they're seeing is an increase in the valuation of their underlying property between property that supports a 3-bedroom home and a property that supports a 4-bedroom home. All right. The challenge is nobody wants to give up those extra dollars that they see. I think that Jeff called the payday, right? Because they now have an underlying value that supports a 4-bedroom home and go back to just having the value of a 3-bedroom home. I think this committee talked about that. Did they want to consider for 7,500 square foot house lots and below, going back and putting a 3-bedroom home product on that? And the conclusion was the community would not accept that. So if somebody feels radically different, we'd be open to listening, but that was our conclusion to that one when we talk about unintended consequences.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. We definitely talked about that, and we're definitely cognizant of the people that own those small lots as far as how they may be impacted. As our graphs were showing, that we were trying to keep them not too far away from where they are now, what they allowable now. Thank you. Anyone in the audience have a question? Yes.
Sorry, Marianne, I don't understand what you were just saying. Can you help me understand?
Full name and address, please.
Sorry, Dina Krieger, 7 Utica Road. Thank you. I was a little confused.
So if you look at a home that currently exists today or existed in 2017, it still exists today, right?
Yep.
It was a 3-bedroom home. It was valued as a 3-bedroom home, et cetera. What happened between 2017 and today is now the value of that lot could support a 4-bedroom home instead of a 3-bedroom home. So the land is more valuable.
Right.
And it's being valued on that basis. The land is being valued on that basis, has become more valuable.
Okay.
Therefore, they're assessed at a higher level because it has more valuable land.
Yep.
Right? Everybody's seen their land prices or assessments go up.
Yes, we did.
Right.
$2,000.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So your assessment's gone up because there's a value that is there even though it's currently untapped.
Okay.
You would recognize it when you sell. All right. But if this committee were to change to go back to saying, well, that land supports a 3-bedroom house, it would be much smaller. We're going to put zoning in place that only supports a 3-bedroom house. It would be much smaller. Right. Then
Okay.
you would see that assessment go down.
Okay.
As Louise says, the tax rate will change, all the taxes will get revalued on everybody. All right, also true. Your assessment though would go down because you would no longer have that increased potential for what could happen on your land if this committee were to make a significant change in smaller lots.
Okay.
So
Couple
what's
questions.
proposed is not a significant change. When you looked at those lines, they were lower than they are currently,
Mhm.
all right? But they still weren't hugely different in the smaller lot area.
Couple questions, please. Thanks, Marion. On the fiscal impact analysis, I'm, as a new town meeting member, trying to do the right thing. And at this point, I just don't feel like I have the right information or enough information to determine on any of these potential options what the outcome should be. I don't pretend to know what's going to happen to values of properties, but I've spoken to a lot of people that are worried about the potential loss in value. So my question is, on the fiscal analysis, did we actually apply the formulas, the A, B, and C formulas? Although, to digress for a second, I'm not sure how we went from, it looks like we're looking at reductions of 1.5, 2.5, and 3 in one area, and then we're looking at reductions A, B, and C in another area. So I was trying to square those. But in any case,
Square them by taking the 1.5, and the 2.5, and the 2. That's approximately the ABC.
They couldn't.
okay. Okay. So it's just a subset of okay, got it. Okay. So have we actually taken these formulas, A, B, and C, the actual formulas that we're looking to do, and apply them to all of the lots in SRB to see what the actual changes would be with respect to, I know we're saying it looks like there's not going to be any reductions in what people can do with their properties, but I can't just take that at face value. I feel like I need to see on a spreadsheet, well, 40% of the properties in Needham will be affected in this way, 10% will be affected this way. If 90% of them are affected, I might vote one way. If 4% are affected, I might vote another way. So I feel like there's got to be a way to take in terms of values, but also in terms of possibilities for additions and what people can do. If we look at the impacts to all of the actual properties. So we know that there are a little bit less than 7,000 homes in SRB, and we know what their lot sizes are, and we know what their current square footage is in terms of livable square foot. We know what we're changing. We know what the formulas are, so we could apply those and really see what would happen to the existing properties. I also want to understand if you guys have looked at all at just the general population, who is going to, I just want to know who is going to be impacted, how are they going to be impacted, and to what extent they're going to be impacted. And then I can make an informed decision. If I know that, 3% of people are going to be impacted and they're young families and there's plenty of time to make up any potential value that they might lose, and I may say, sure, great, do that. But if I know that there's X amount of seniors in the community and they're relying on their home as their primary asset, if I know a big percentage of those folks are going to be impacted, then I would vote a different way. So I don't feel, I know you guys have done a tremendous amount of work. I respect it, but I don't feel confident that I know, unless I'm missing something, really how people are going to be impacted in terms of the values of their homes. All of the numbers that I have seen, that I've looked at, have been theoretical numbers, meaning, this is what we can, in option B, for example, we can go up to 6,331 square feet, but how many homes in Needham actually are 6,331? I just want to know where we all see it. And I want to know, I know a third of our community are seniors. How many of those people are going to be impacted? How many of the homes, there are 3 categories that I saw in the proposal, in the thing tonight, right? Between 800 and $1 million. You're looking at the developers are interested in between this and this. So I want, okay, how many homes are in that category? If I know how many homes are in that category, that'll give me a sense of potentially how many are considered, in the way you look at it, how many are considered tear downs, and for how many, and then who owns those? Are those young families? Are they seniors? I just want to know, I want to know these actual numbers instead of all of these theoretical numbers. And I don't say that as a slight. I say it to just, I don't know how to wrap my head around the numbers that I'm seeing now because they feel theoretical to me. They're not actual, if we look at, again, how many homes we have assessed values. It was explained to me that the assessed values, everything that was reassessed now, they're supposedly supposed to market value, right? So if we look at all the assessed values for, I know new ones are coming out, how many of those are assessed at between 800 and $1 million, right? If we know, we can look, we can see how many are, right? And then we can say, well, this is how they're going to be impacted. Is that a big number? Is that a small number? That's the way I can make a decision on what makes sense. Maybe none of this makes sense. Maybe no changes make sense to me. Maybe the third one. But the last thing I'll say, and this is just an opinion, two things. I get a little bit frustrated when I hear people talk about, this is my personal opinion, I hear people talk about, get over it, take a little bit less for your value. I don't have any skin in the game. My partner and I have lived here for 25 years. We're going to croak in our homes unless we get put somewhere else because we can't afford to move someplace else, right? So we're going to be there for the duration. We potentially want to put it on an ADU. We potentially want to put an addition for a couple of different reasons. So we're not selling tomorrow, next year, the year after. So if something happens, it's not that important to me. But there are a lot of seniors in town that this is their potential life savings. And I have firsthand knowledge now about the cost. My stepmom has dementia. They're spending close to $20,000 a month to care for her. So when we talk about if a dip in value of, even if that number is accurate, that $91,000, maybe that's not a lot of money to people, but that's, 3-4 months of senior care. And maybe they can't wait for 2 years for the market to come back. Maybe they have to get out right away because they have to move. So I want us to be thinking about those people. And I guess when we talk about sort of maintaining starter homes, that's a wonderful idea, but there's got to be other solutions to look at because the thought, chances are someone coming in buying my modest home, if it's a young family, it'd be wonderful, but chances are financially they're a lot better off than we are. And so we talk about making these sort of starter homes available for young families to come in. Wonderful, I agree. But at what cost to potential owners? So anyway, sorry to rabble on.
Great questions that we're going to, I think we can dig up some of the data, but no, I understand that. Did anyone else comment? Okay. Again, thank you, Dina. I think there's some information there we can dig up. I think there's another question.
Holly Clark. I live on Central Avenue. Thank you to everyone for the time and effort that you put in. I really want to echo a lot of what Dina just said. One of my questions as I looked through was on the comparable town page. I would be interested in knowing what actually exists. Like we have, this is possible, right? That's the one chart, which puts it really high. I would like to know, like, if that's actually what's happened, then that's more relevant to me. If we find out that actually what's on the ground happening in Needham is on par, what it looks like other towns permit, it's a different scenario. I think that was part of what Dina was saying, like what's really going on. Take it kind of out of speculative, but this is what's happening. And it kind of lets us know what we need to change or not change. If the market on the ground is keeping us lower than what's possible to be built, then it tells you that might not be the lever that you need to pull. I also think we have a bunch of levers here. And it seems to me being very careful as to which ones we target first, if we choose to target anything, makes sense, because this really does impact housing values. And I watched the meeting where we had the folks from Concord and the folks from Lexington talk about what happens. And common sense tells me if you change what you can do on a piece of property, you affect the value of that property. So if you limit it, you have limited the value of that property. And it seemed to me the gentleman from Lexington was crystal clear that when they limited what they could do on the properties there, it impacted clearly and dramatically the value of those homes. And he did say it recovered, but what he said was so you've dropped, and sure, if you hadn't dropped, it would move up. But it was that the market moved up, but it didn't catch up. Like if you were knocked down 20%, sure, you made it back to where you would have been, but you were still below the value if you hadn't imposed that limitation. And I think it is really, really important to think about who is in these homes. And to the degree that I've listened to folks in town saying they're in a smaller home and they are holding back on doing improvements because they anticipate that they'd never get that back, that they're going to get what they get because the property is more valuable to be taken over and rebuilt, and whoever buys it. Like if they they're not putting in a new kitchen because they think their house is going to be knocked down. So they save what they would have spent. And that's a really tough nut to crack. But it would be very difficult for me to impact the home and the asset that people counted on. And folks that moved to town, it's been their home. They've invested in it. They've invested in the town, and they count on it to help them as they move forward in their lives, whether it be for care for themselves, for their kids, whatever it is. So I would, I agree with what Dina was saying. Like, I need to know more. And I do think it's like, we know who it is, right? It's SRB. And we could send a postcard to every single one of those homes and saying, we're talking about changing the zoning that will affect you. And I think that's something to think about. We have the capacity to do that. We certainly have time between now and if we're thinking it comes up in May to let people do it. And it may be better than having folks show up at town meeting saying, I just heard about this yesterday and how are you doing this? Which maybe just par for the course, right? Like the best of intentions, we can reach out to people, but we can actually then say, we did reach out, so that you do have an opportunity to come forward or speak to your town meeting member or do whatever. And the last thing I think about is sometimes we're always fighting the last battle. And I think folks now are working from home. Their kids are coming back home because of affordability issues, right? So we're having more extended families in properties. And I think it's worth thinking about that it's not necessarily a single family home anymore. It's kind of why ADUs aren't being counted, right? It's an acknowledgement that there's some shifting happening. So before we tighten this all up, I think it is worth more thought about the changes that are happening and how to facilitate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Holly. Yeah, thank you, Holly. Well,
I wanted to reassure Holly and everybody else who's watching this that we are very mindful in the work that we are doing and have done about the importance of not compromising value in people's homes. The programs that we tested produced homes that are selling in the greater Boston market for prices that are higher than they are in Needham, in communities whose indices for achievement are in the same range as Needham's. So that's one. Two, you can look at the housing lens through many perspectives. One is the person selling the house. The other is the neighbors around that house whose lives are changed by the creation of a much larger house that in some cases obscures sunlight and the value of their outdoor space. There are many interests here. This committee has tried very hard to balance them all and bring the planning board a range of alternatives to study further and bring to town meeting, not the least of which is the original referral from town meeting that resulted from a change in the definition of floor area ratio, FAR. And the definition this committee has looked at and is leaning towards recommending to the planning board is one that recognizes the bulk of a house on a lot and coming up with a meaningful way to regulate that allows for the profitable sale of that house that's ripped down to create the new house, as well as the quality of life in the neighborhood. That's why when Oscar presented the setback diagram, you could see that houses in a neighborhood where there's a large setback are affected if a new builder comes in and builds a house that's 20 feet from the street. Their quality of life is diminished by many measures. So we've looked at all of those aspects. We've tried to balance them. And what we're ultimately going to give to the planning board will be up to the planning board. But I think we've produced good data and there are opportunities for decision. And lastly, I left the planning board, I think in 2008. That was after the first serious effort to resolve this issue, not on my part, but on the part of the planning board and town meeting. This town has heard this issue from its citizens for decades. People are unhappy about the change in the size of houses in neighborhoods. It does change the neighborhood. So to the extent that we can create stable, attractive neighborhoods, ultimately that raises everybody's value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo. Oscar, do you want to address any part of that? It'd be good for us. Bring the mic here.
Yeah, I would just say that, I don't know if it needs to be said again, but I'll say it again, that I think what is fiscal analysis is an intentional assessment of the builder's math to assess his, potential profit and whether or not he's going to be engaged in that. And so I think the other buyer is also the homeowner, the end user, that's going to be there and not going to have the same set of decisions on what he's going to consider for his purchasing power. So again, I think that whether this adjustment affects certain lots in some ways, as you saw, smaller lots may be still something that is affected by builders. Maybe that math might be slightly different so that there may be more homeowners or end users that buy those smaller lots. I think in general, to not to oversimplify this, but the general impact that we've heard from many conversations with many different individuals and groups of interests is that whatever would come from a modest adjustment, would that be the case, will be a momentary adjustment. It'll be I think the quote from Lexington, I would take issue with exactly how that was paraphrased. The Lexington official said that relative to builders, the impact on the purchasing by builders was tens of thousands of dollars, and it was a couple of years for adjustment, but then it would be back up. I think we've heard that the market is so strong here and in a lot of our peer towns that there will not be any significant lasting impact from any change that we make. There would be an adjustment to the mathematics for builders relative to home buyers. But in fact, the adjustments over time will be back up and you'll be buying and selling houses and house lots in this town. I think in in some period of time, within some period of adjustment. So I think the concern we've been wrestling with is how we can make adjustments that are going to allow houses that we consider to be something reasonable based on what we've looked at in other towns on certain size lots, and that still is dramatically, as Marianne said, has the ability to be a 4-bedroom house on even smaller lots. So we're setting a bar very high and raising our bar to allow for that to happen. Again, this is another consideration, is the impact on the administration costs in this town. And so by allowing larger houses on this sliding scale on lots, we think that that's going to avoid a lot of the necessity to go in and have a special permit or ask for something larger. And so we've, again, tried to make our best assessments of how to balance all these competing factors.
Thank you, Oscar. Holly, did you want to?
I just want to respond here. I actually listened to the gentleman from Lexington, and what he said is the folks that sell their houses right after the change are impacted. It was the seller.
To builders. That's what he said.
The person that sent to the builder. I don't worry about the respectfully, right.
To clarify.
Okay.
His impact was specifically he saw a reduction in builder purchasing as a result.
What I understood him to say, and we could both go back and look, but I watched it again today because this is, look, if this didn't impact the housing values for the residents, we're good, right? Like they're like fine. But what he said is like, so if someone sells their house, we changed the bylaw in May, and someone is up to sell their house in July, they're going to get impacted. In a couple years, the property value will recover to what it would have been. But that's just a real thing. That's all I'm saying. And I understand, and I so appreciate all the work, and Mo, your comments about being thoughtful. I'm not in any way suggesting we're not. I'm just saying that it's a concern, and it's why you've had to have all these meetings, right? Because it is a concern. And I do wonder, we said, well, maybe after it goes back up, the builders will be willing to pay more. I don't, maybe, but I think they're in business to kind of make money. And if they can continue buying houses at a set rate, that's what they're going to do. That's their business. I don't expect them to do anything. They're maximizing their profit because that's their goal. As for the setbacks, I think it's really important. And I don't think now is the time to be specific on it, but the idea of an average setback for every building, because it's not just houses. I have painful experience with a Section 3 use that said, well, this is what is permitted. So I would say, if you're protecting the neighborhood, say it for any building that goes there and consider an average setback. And that could go across town. And that I would think would be a really positive change for everybody, because it just says, if the market has said on Central Avenue, the houses are 100 feet back from the street, because it's a really busy road. It makes sense. That's where it is. So if somebody wants to come in, it could be reasonable to say you need to come in and recognize that, or the town should have the authority to say, this is in fact the character of this neighborhood. We didn't do it before, but we could learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Yeah, one thing, I mean, Lee,
somebody had raised a question about postcards and what the outreach is this planned, and I just wanted to comment on that and let you know that it is planned to do a postcard to all the town residents at the time when the planning board would initiate its hearing process on any zoning change. So we do intend to do that kind of outreach. It was just a question of when in the process that would be initiated.
Okay, thank you. I think, Ed, did you want to make a comment?
Just a quick, I don't want to beat this to death, but it's really an important distinction between the sale to a developer versus the sale to a homeowner. It is true in Lexington's statement, you're right, that early on after the change in the bylaws, there is an impact on the value to a developer because of the size of the house that they can build. They're willing to pay less money for it. That's not the same as the value to a homeowner. Homeowners don't really enter into the discussion looking at the developer. They say, what is this house worth to me? And one of the pieces of data we looked at was the sale of houses in Needham over the past 3 years. I think it was 2022 to 2024, those 3 years. 70% of the house sales, many of them, actually most of them on a small scale, below 2,500 square feet, 70% of those houses were sold to homeowners. Everybody has this notion that everything that goes on in Needham is all about teardowns. It's not. Most of the houses are sold to homeowners. And the houses that are sold to homeowners are houses that are maintained, that are kept up, and they maintain their value. People who just assume that their houses are going to get torn down, and because of that, they're not going to invest anything in it. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to get torn down because you're not maintaining the property. So please distinguish between sales to homeowners versus sales to developers. It's a totally different package.
Thank you, Ed. Paul, did you want to say something?
Yeah, that's somewhat on the similar point. There are definitely properties in town where the only person who is interested in the property is a developer, and that is generally because of the condition of the property. If it requires that a certain, most of them are some houses, they're only candidates for teardowns, but there are a lot of other houses where yes, the developer is interested in the house, but also a bunch of homeowners, potential future homeowners, are also interested in that property. That property price is not going to be impacted in near as significant a way as maybe the property that the only person interested is the developer. What may happen in a scenario like that is the developer decides, okay, well, I'm not giving any more than $1 million, just put a figure on it for that. But that might keep 2 or 3 homeowners in that bid for a longer time. So it's not, it was a very hard thing to do fiscally to kind of come up, back to Dina's point, what we picked was the average house on the average size lot. So with the average sale prices, we could have gone down below that, we could have gone up above it. We just used the average for that to get some data. We do have some other figures that we can add probably a little bit more information on the various different house sizes that have been sold over the last number of years. But to Ed's point, it is a very important distinction. There are a lot of sales here in town where it's not just a developer that's interested in them. There are multiple parties, including end users, who are interested in the property. And yes, maybe the developer will pull out at an earlier stage in the bid, but that doesn't mean they're the only person who is prepared to make an offer on that property.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that, as Ed and Paul were saying, it's been drilled into people's heads for I don't know how long. You know, don't buy, I shouldn't bother investing in my house because it's just going to be torn down. Well, as one of the slides is showing that there are different tiers of where what will be attractive to the people want to buy a house. And a house that has some maintenance going on with it will be more attractive to people that want to buy into town. And a lot of people want to buy into town. A lot of end users want to buy into town. Needham is a very attractive town for many reasons. We have a greater hospital. We have a lot of public. We have the MBTA coming in 4 stops. We have great schools. We have a lot of reasons why people want to buy into Needham. And so those homes have a lot of bidders out there for them if they just have the opportunity. Sometimes that's what it takes. It's just the opportunity. But Alex, do we have any other questions? Anyone online right now? Mary, did you want to say something?
I was just going to give a time check and note that it is
Yep.
9:20.
9:25. Any other questions from the audience at all? No. Mo, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
I said what I was going to say, except thank you for participating and coming. There are means of communicating with this committee and then after us, the planning board. And every opinion is welcome. Everybody has a different perspective. All I can say as a member of this committee is we've done due diligence and tried very hard to balance the interests of everybody in this community.
Thank you, Mo. And so this will be the last meeting of this committee with the public. Because after this, we will be sending our information to the planning board. So I would like to thank our committee, basically Jean McKnight, Miriam Cooley, Heidi Frail, Mo Handel, my co-chair, Tina Burgos, Bill Paulson, Paul McGovern, Oscar Mertz, Chris Potter, Rob Dangle, Joe Matthews, and Ed Quinlan. So we've been at this now. I'm not sure if it's been quite a year yet, but we've been doing this for a while. We appreciate all the input. And again, this is the last time we will be meeting with the public, but we will be meeting again to analyze what we think is the best option for the community of Needham to send to the planning board. But thank you very much. We appreciate your time tonight. My name is Artie Crocker, the co-chair with Mo Handel of the Large House Review Committee. Thank you very much, everyone. Do we need to adjourn? Oh, roll call vote to adjourn. So we're going to move to adjourn.
Motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Any other debate? I don't hear any. Okay. Jean McKnight. Jean, vote to adjourn. Marion Cooley.
Yes.
Heidi Frail. Mo Handel.
Yes.
Tina Burgos. Bill Paulson.
Yes.
Paul McGovern.
Yes.
Oscar Mertz. Chris Potter. Rob Dangle's not here. Joe Matthews is not here. Ed Quinlan. Oh, Joe's online. I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry, Mike. Sorry, Joe, you're online.
Yep.
I think I heard him say yes. What's that? This meeting was Joe. And Artie Crocker, the co-chair, votes yes. Thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned.